Colette Owens. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my parents sent me a text message telling me not to come to their anniversary party because only high society guests were invited. I thought I was used to being pushed aside. 10 years without a single family Christmas photo. 10 years of being introduced to their friends as the one who works with old buildings. But that text message, it was different. It was final. So I stayed in my apartment that night. Alone. Just like they wanted. Then my phone rang. It was my sister Vivian. The one who never calls unless she needs something. Her voice was shaking. Why did you hide this from the family? Mom and Dad just saw the news and... I didn't hide anything. I just stopped explaining myself to people who refused to listen. Before I continue, if this story resonates with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to hear what happened next. Where are you listening from right now? Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know. Now, let me take you back 3 years, to the day I received a project that would change everything. I grew up in the Owens household just outside Boston, a family that looked perfect in every Christmas card they sent out, upper middle class, country club membership, the kind of people who measured success by which neighbor noticed your new car first. My older sister Vivian was the pretty one, the social one, the daughter who married Bradley Hartley from Goldman Sachs and moved into a 6-bedroom colonial in Wellesley. My parents couldn't stop talking about her. And then there was me. I chose architecture. Specifically, historic preservation, the kind of work that involves crawling through century-old attics and fighting to save buildings that developers want to tear down. My mother once introduced me to her book club as the one who does something with old houses. Construction, I think. My father was more direct. When you have a real career, he told me one Thanksgiving, we'll talk about putting you back on the Christmas card. Back on. Like I'd been erased. The last time I appeared in a family photo was 10 years ago, at Vivian's wedding. I found out later that my mother had cropped me out of the version she posted on Facebook. The composition looked better, she explained when I asked. I still have that original photo somewhere. In it, I'm standing at the edge of the frame, wearing a second-hand dress I'd found at a consignment shop in Cambridge. Vivian is in the center, glowing and bewaying. My parents are beaming at her. No one is looking at me. But here's the thing I didn't know then, the thing that would take me a decade to understand. My silence during those years wasn't weakness. It was fuel. And it was building towards something none of them could have predicted. 3 years ago, I got a phone call that changed the trajectory of my career. The Whitmore Estate, a 150-year-old landmark mansion in the heart of Massachusetts, had been scheduled for demolition. Developers wanted the land. The Historical Society had given up. Everyone assumed it was over, but the National Trust for Historic Preservation wasn't ready to let it go. They needed an architect who could present a restoration plan compelling enough to justify the $12 million budget. Someone who understood that old buildings weren't just structures. They were stories. They called me. I spent 3 weeks preparing my proposal. I researched every original blueprint, every renovation record, every newspaper article from 1874 onward. When I presented to the board, I didn't just show them what Whitmore Estate could become. I showed them what it had always been, and why that mattered. Margaret Caldwell, the executive director of the National Trust, signed the approval letter herself. I still have that email saved in a folder labeled Evidence. Not because I thought I'd need proof someday, but because I wanted to remember the moment someone in power believed in me. For 18 months, I lived and breathed that restoration. I hand-selected every replacement timber. I tracked down artisans who still knew how to restore Victorian plasterwork. I spent 3 months on the front doors alone. 2 massive panels of quarter-sawn oak that had been rotting for decades. My parents never knew. I worked under my firm's name, not my own. I don't like attention. And honestly, I'd stopped trying to impress people who never planned to be impressed. But I didn't know then that my parents, of all the venues in Massachusetts, would choose Whitmore Estate for their 35th anniversary party, the building I'd saved, the doors I'd restored, the legacy I'd protected. Funny how life arranges its ironies. Let me tell you about last Christmas. I wasn't invited, of course, but I showed up anyway, drove 2 hours through a snowstorm because some part of me still believed that, maybe, this time, things would be different. My mother opened the door in a cream cashmere sweater, Hermes scarf draped just so around her neck. Her smile flickered for exactly 1 second when she saw me. "Oh, Colette, we weren't expecting you." "I brought a gift," I said, holding up a wrapped package, a first edition book on European cathedral architecture. I'd found it at an estate sale and spent more on it than I should have. She took it without looking at the paper. "How thoughtful. I'll put it with the others." Inside, Vivian was holding court by the fireplace, showing off photos of her latest philanthropy event on her phone. My father was deep in conversation with a man I recognized from the news. Judge Harrison, a federal appointee and apparently a new addition to their social circle. When my father saw me, he didn't say hello. He just nodded once, then turned back to his conversation. "As I was saying, Judge, our daughter Vivian has been doing wonderful work with the Children's Hospital Foundation." Our daughter. Singular. I stood in that living room for 45 minutes. No one spoke to me directly. When my mother introduced me to a woman from her book club, she said, "This is Colette. She does renovations, hammers and things." The woman's smile was polite and dismissive. "Oh, how interesting." I left before dessert. On my way out, I passed the hallway table where my gift had been placed, still wrapped, with a sticky note on top in my mother's handwriting. "Re-gift to charity?" That was the night I made myself a promise. I would never again walk into a room where I wasn't wanted. 3 weeks before my parents' anniversary party, I was sitting in my apartment in Cambridge when my phone buzzed. A notification from a group chat I'd been removed from 2 years earlier. Owen's family. They'd added me back, just to send one message. "Colette, don't come to the anniversary party. Only high society guests will be there. We don't want to explain your situation. Mom and Dad." I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Your situation. Like I was a problem to be managed. An inconvenience to be hidden. I didn't reply. Some messages don't deserve the energy of a response, but here's what my parents didn't know. That same afternoon, a different envelope arrived in my mailbox. Heavy cream stock, the American Institute of Architects seal in Boston gold. I opened it with shaking hands. "Dear Ms. Owens, on behalf of the AIA Gold Medal Selection Committee, we are pleased to inform you that you have been nominated for the 2024 Gold Medal in the Emerging Voice category. Your restoration work on Whitmore Estate has been cited as a defining example of preservation excellence." The Gold Medal. Architecture's highest honor. The same award given to Frank Lloyd Wright, I.M. Pei, Frank Gehry. And at the bottom of the letter, one signature. Margaret Caldwell, Executive Director, National Trust for Historic Preservation. The same Margaret Caldwell that my parents, I would later learn, had personally invited to their anniversary party. The woman they wanted to impress for her charity board connections. My mentor. I set the letter down next to my phone. The text message from my mother glowed on the screen beside it. 2 letters. One telling me I wasn't worthy. One telling me I was exceptional. Both arrived on the same day. 1 week before the party, Vivian called. This was unusual. My sister doesn't call unless she wants something, information, validation, or someone to blame. I answered anyway, because old habits die hard. "Colette, how are you?" Her voice was honey sweet, the tone she uses when she's performing. "I'm fine, Vivian. What do you need?" A small pause. "I just wanted you to know. I tried to convince Mom and Dad to invite you. I really did. But you know how Mom is about appearances." I said nothing. Waited. "Honestly," she continued, "it's probably for the best. You'd be uncomfortable around those people anyway. The Harrisons will be there, and the Pierces and some executives from Dad's old firm. It's not really your scene, you know?" "My scene. You know what I mean. All that small talk about vacations and investments. You'd be bored." She laughed lightly. "I'm doing you a favor, really." I almost believed her. That's the thing about Vivian. She's been gaslighting so long, she's convinced herself it's kindness. "So," she continued, and here was the real reason for the call. "What have you been up to lately? Anything exciting?" She was fishing, looking for information to share at the party, probably to prove she still kept in touch with her troubled sister. Nothing much, I said. Just work. Still doing the old building thing? Still doing the old building thing. Well, I could hear her disappointment. No gossip to harvest. Take care of yourself, okay? And don't take the party thing personally. It's really not about you. But it was about me. It was always about me. Specifically, about making sure I stayed invisible. I found out later that Vivian hadn't advocated for my invitation at all. She was the one who'd suggested to her mother. She's always so awkward at these things. It'll be easier for everyone if she just doesn't come. My father called 3 days later. This was even more unusual than Vivian. Richard Omens doesn't make phone calls, he issues summons. The fact that he was reaching out directly meant he wanted to make sure the message was clear. Colette. His voice was the same one he'd used my entire childhood, clipped, efficient, like he was closing a deal. I understand you received the message about that anniversary. I did. Good. Your mother and I have discussed it. The guest list is fine. I waited for him to say something else. An explanation maybe. Even a thin justification. Instead, Judge Harrison will be there, several partners from my old firm, important people. I understand, Dad. Do you? He sighed, and I heard years of disappointment in that sound. If you'd made different career choices, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I've always said that. A woman with your intelligence could have done anything. Law, medicine, finance. Instead, you chose to play with old buildings. Play. Like my 18-month restoration of a historical landmark was a hobby. The guest list is fine, I repeated. He said that. I'm glad we understand each other. He was about to hang up when he added, almost as an afterthought. Some woman from the National Trust is coming, Margaret something. Your mother wants to get on her charity board, so it's important everything goes smoothly. No distractions. Margaret Caldwell. The woman who'd mentored me through the most important project of my career. The woman whose signature was on my AIA nomination letter. My father was hoping to impress my own mentor, at a party in a building I had restored, while keeping me hidden like a family embarrassment. No distractions, I said. Got it. I hung up before he could hear me laugh. 2 days before the party, I received a text from Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, a woman I saw maybe once a year, at obligatory family gatherings. Colette, honey, your mother told me about the party situation. I just wanted to check in. She mentioned you've been struggling with some mental health issues? Is everything okay? I stared at the message for a long time. Mental health issues. My mother hadn't just excluded me from the guest list. She'd created a cover story, a reason for my absence that made her look compassionate and me look broken. I went to Facebook. I shouldn't have, but I did. There it was, buried in the comments of a post from one of my mother's friends. Diane, so sorry to hear about your younger daughter. Mental illness is so tough on families. You're handling it with such grace. My mother had liked the comment. I scrolled further, found another. Sending prayers for Colette. Diane has been so strong through all of this. And my mother's reply. Thank you, Susan, we're doing our best. Some children just struggle. I looked around my apartment, at the framed architecture awards on my walls, the stack of trade magazines with my projects featured inside, the email from the AIA sitting open on my laptop. I was sitting in the office of a woman who had just been nominated for the highest honor in her profession, and my mother was telling people I couldn't function. Here's the thing about lies, they need maintenance. They need to be fed and watered and repeated until everyone forgets they started as fiction. My mother had built an entire mythology around her troubled second daughter, and she'd been cultivating it for years. But mythologies have a weakness. They collapse the moment reality walks through the door. The night before the party, I called Margaret Caldwell. Not to complain, I'd never been good at that, but to confirm the timeline for the AIA announcement. I knew the nomination would be made public soon. I just didn't know exactly when. Colette. Margaret's voice was warm, the way it always was. I was hoping you'd call. The committee has finalized everything. The announcement goes live tomorrow evening. Tomorrow. the same day as my parents' party. That's wonderful, I said, and meant it. There's something else. I could hear the smile in her voice. The National Trust Board has approved a new grant, $500,000 for the governor's mansion restoration, and we want you to lead it. I had to sit down. Margaret, I don't know what to say. Say yes, you've earned this. She paused. Will your family be celebrating with you tomorrow? I imagine they must be incredibly proud. The silence stretched a beat too long. They have other plans, I said finally. Ah. Something shifted in her tone. Not pity exactly, but understanding. Actually, speaking of plans, I'll be attending a party tomorrow myself, some event at Whitmore Estate. I'm quite looking forward to seeing the building again. My heart stopped. An anniversary party? I asked, though I already knew. Yes, I believe so. The Omens family, if I'm not mistaken. Do you know them? I nearly laughed. You could say that. Small world, Margaret said cheerfully. Well, if you find yourself free tomorrow evening, you know where to find me. I'd love to toast your nomination in person. I thanked her and hung up. Margaret would be at my parents' party, in my building, surrounded by people who'd been told I was mentally ill. And the announcement that would prove them all wrong was scheduled to go live at 7:30 p.m. Let me pause here for a moment. If you've ever been treated by your own family like you didn't exist, but you're still standing, still building, still moving forward, I see you. Tight, still standing, in the comments. And if you want to know what happened when the truth finally came out at that party, make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss what comes next. Now, back to the story. The morning of the party, I wake up alone in my Cambridge apartment. Sunlight came through the windows, at that golden angle that makes everything look softer than it is. I made coffee the way I always do, French press, dark roast, no sugar, and sat at my kitchen table surrounded by the things that made this space mine. Architecture books stacked on every surface, dried lavender in a mason jar on the windowsill, a framed print of the Whitmore Estate blueprints above my desk. My apartment is small. 800 square feet, maybe. Nothing impressive by my parents' standards. But everything in it I'd chosen. Everything in it I'd earned. I opened my laptop to work on some project notes, determined to treat this day like any other. But then Instagram's algorithm betrayed me. Vivian's story appeared at the top of my feed. A video of her in the back of a black car, champagne flute in hand, getting her hair touched up at some salon that probably charged more per hour than my monthly utilities. The caption, getting ready for the big night. I kept scrolling. Shouldn't have, but I did. Another story. The front facade of Whitmore Estate, decorated with white flowers and twinkling lights for the evening. She'd filmed it from the car window as they pulled up for setup. And there, in the corner of the frame, I saw them. The oak doors. My doors. The ones I'd spent 3 months restoring, sourcing replacement hardware from a specialty shop in Vermont, hand sanding every penny until the grain emerged like it had been waiting a century to be seen again. Vivian didn't know. None of them knew. They were about to throw a party in a building full of my fingerprints, and they'd told me I wasn't welcome to attend. I closed Instagram and went back to my coffee. I didn't witness what happened next directly, but I heard about it later. From Margaret, from Aunt Patricia, from the fragments my family let slip in the aftermath. So let me tell you what I pieced together. The party began at 6 o'clock. 150 guests arrived in a procession of German luxury sedans and hired town cars. Black tie. The women in gowns that cost more than my first car, the men in tuxedos tailored on Newbury Street. The string quartet played Vivaldi as servers in white gloves circulated with champagne. Krug, according to Vivian's Instagram story, $300 a body. My mother stood at the entrance in a burgundy Valentino gown, diamonds at her ears, greeting every guest like she was hosting the Met Gala. My father worked the room with the energy of a man who'd been rehearsing his small talk for weeks. The venue is spectacular, Diane, one guest reportedly said as she walked through the restored grand foyer. Who did the renovation? My mother waved a hand. Oh, some firm or another. The event coordinator handled all that. But isn't it perfect? I just knew this was the place when I saw it. Perfect. A building she never bothered to research. A restoration she didn't know was mine. Vivian floated through the crowd in Oscar de la Renta, her husband Bradley trailing behind her like a well-dressed accessory. She posed for photos beside the marble fireplace, beneath the restored chandelier, against the hand-painted wallpaper I'd fought to preserve when everyone else wanted to tear it out. The centerpieces on every table were white hydrangeas in crystal vases, flanked by diptyque candles. "Mom's taste is impeccable," Vivian captioned her latest story. And somewhere across town, I sat in my small apartment, watching it all unfold on a 6-inch screen. Margaret Caldwell arrived at 7 o'clock. She came without fanfare, no entourage, no announcement. But the room noticed anyway. Margaret has that quality. She doesn't demand attention, she simply carries it with her. Understated elegance. A navy dress, simple pearls, the kind of presence that comes from decades of being the most knowledgeable person in any room about any building she stands in. My mother spotted her immediately. "Mrs. Caldwell?" Diane crossed the foyer with her champagne glass raised, her smile wide enough to accommodate all her ambitions. "What an absolute honor to have you here. I've heard so much about the National Trust's work, truly inspiring." Margaret accepted the greeting with polite neutrality. "Thank you for the invitation. I must say I have a personal connection to this estate. It's lovely to see it in use." My mother's eyes lit up. An opening for connection, for networking, for whatever board position she'd been angling toward. "Oh, how wonderfully. Did you attend events here before the renovation?" "After, actually." Margaret glanced around the room, her gaze lingering on the restored crown molding, the original hardwood floors, the windows I'd fought to preserve. "I was quite involved with the restoration project, worked closely with the lead architect." My mother nodded along, clearly not listening, already calculating her next move. "Speaking of which," Margaret continued, "I was hoping to see Colette here tonight. Is she running late?" My mother's smile froze, for 1 second, just one. The mask slipped. "Colette?" She recovered quickly, rearranging her expression into something approaching concern. "Oh, she couldn't make it. She's not well, I'm afraid. You know how it is." Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's strange. I spoke with her just yesterday. She sounded perfectly fine." My mother had no response for that. The first crack had appeared. At 7:30 p.m., the American Institute of Architects published their announcement. The AIA Gold Medal nominations appeared on their website, their social media accounts, and in a press release sent to every major architecture publication in the country. Within minutes, Architectural Digest shared their pre-written feature article. 12 pages of photographs and interviews, months in the making, timed perfectly to the announcement. The headline: Colette Owens, the woman reshaping America's architectural heritage. I was still in my apartment when I saw it go live. I refreshed the page 3 times to make sure it was real. My photo, my work, my name, all of it, out in the world for anyone to find, including the guests at my parents' party. It started with a local journalist, a woman who covered arts and culture for the Boston Globe and had been invited as a friend of a friend. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced at the screen, then did a double take. "Did you see this?" she said to the man beside her. "The architect who restored this building just got nominated for the AIA Gold Medal." The man leaned over to look. "Whitmore Estate? This building?" "The very one." She scrolled through the article. "Colette Owens, only 32, they're calling her one of the most important preservation architects of her generation." The name began to circulate, whispered at first, then spoken aloud. Guests pulled out their phones. The Architectural Digest article loaded on screen after screen, and in that article, there was a photograph. Me, standing in front of Whitmore Estate's restored entrance, smiling in a way I'd almost forgotten I could. One guest turned to another. "Wait, Owens? Isn't that the host's name?" The question hung in the air like a lit fuse. My mother is very good at managing narratives. She's had decades of practice, curating her image, controlling what people see, burying what they shouldn't. But she couldn't manage this. "Colette Owens?" A woman in emeralds approached my mother with her phone extended. "Diane, is this your daughter?" My mother glanced at the screen, saw my face, saw the headline, and her expression cycled through surprise, then recognition, then something close to panic, all in the space of a heartbeat. Oh, that must be a different Owens. She laughed, but it came out wrong. Too high, too fast. Our Colette works in construction, I believe, not architecture. But the article mentions she's from the Boston area, and she has the same last name. Common name. My mother waved her hand dismissively. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. But another guest had already Googled my name. It says here she grew up in Wellesley. Isn't that where you're from? My father materialized at my mother's side, drawn by the commotion. What's going on? They're saying the architect who restored this building is someone named Colette Owens. My father's face went carefully blank. His boardroom expression, the one he used when deals went sideways. I'm sure there's been some mistake. But there was no mistake. The Architectural Digest feature was thorough. It mentioned my education, my early projects, and, most damning of all, included a quote from me about my childhood. I learned early that my work would speak louder than words. In my family, I never felt like my voice was heard. So I let the building speak instead. Someone read that quote aloud, the room went quiet. And my mother, for perhaps the first time in her life, had absolutely nothing to say. My phone rang at 7:52 p.m. I was still sitting at my kitchen table, still in my apartment, still alone. The AIA announcement had been live for 22 minutes. I knew what was coming before I even looked at the screen. Vivian. I answered. Why did you hide this from the family? Her voice was shaking, not with concern but with fury barely contained. Mom and Dad just saw the news and they're completely blindsided. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Hello to you too, Vivian. Don't you dare be sarcastic with me right now. Everyone at this party is asking about you. Everyone. Judge Harrison's wife just cornered Mom asking why you aren't here. Mrs. Caldwell, that National Trust woman, keeps bringing you up. This is supposed to be Mom and Dad's night, and you made it about yourself. I let her words wash over me. In the background, I could hear the party. Music, clinking glasses, and my mother's voice rising with forced brightness. Yes, of course we knew, we just wanted to keep it private. I didn't make anything about myself, I said quietly. I just existed. I worked. I succeeded. And nobody asked. You did this on purpose. Vivian's composure cracked completely. You waited until tonight to... The AIA decides when announcements go out, not me. You should have told us. You should have warned us. I almost laughed. Warned you about what? That I'm good at my job? You've had 10 years to ask me a single genuine question about my career. You never did. Silence. Then, muffled, I heard my mother in the background. We had no idea. She never tells us anything. I have to go, Vivian said, and hung up. I set down my phone, and let the silence settle around me. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for existing. Back at the party, everything was unraveling. The guests had stopped admiring the decor, and started watching my family. It was subtle at first. Glances exchanged, eyebrows raised. But by 8 o'clock, the shift was unmistakable. My parents' anniversary celebration had become something else entirely. Judge Harrison, a man my father had been cultivating for months, walked directly up to him with champagne still in hand. Richard, your daughter designed this building, and you didn't mention it? My father's jaw tightened. It's complicated, Your Honor. Family matters. Complicated. The judge's tone suggested he didn't find that explanation satisfying. He told me earlier that you were proud of your family. Seems he left out a rather significant accomplishment. Across the room, Vivian stood by the bar, attempting to maintain her composure while scrolling furiously through her phone. Bradley hovered nearby, his expression unreadable. I would learn later that he'd pulled up the Architectural Digest article himself, and read every word. My mother, meanwhile, was attempting to do what she'd always done. Control the story. Of course we're proud of Colette, she said to a cluster of curious guests. Her smile stretched thin. We've always supported her. We just didn't want to overshadow the party with her news, you understand? But Aunt Patricia was there. Aunt Patricia, who had texted me about my mental health issues just 2 days earlier. Diane, she said slowly, He told me Colette was struggling, that she couldn't function, that's why she wasn't invited tonight. The guest turned to look at my mother. That's not exactly, my mother started, and that article says she led a $12 million restoration project, the building we're standing in right now. My mother's champagne glass trembled slightly. The baccarat crystal caught the light from the chandelier, the same chandelier I had fought to restore instead of replace. No script could save her now. Margaret Caldwell had been watching from across the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Margaret simply stepped toward the center of the grand foyer, set her glass on a passing server's tray, and waited. Conversations quieted. Eyes turned. When you spent 40 years commanding boardrooms and preservation committees, you learn how to hold a room without demanding anything. I hope you'll all indulge me for a moment, she said, her voice carrying with effortless clarity. I'd like to say a few words about this estate. And about the remarkable woman who saved it. My mother's face went pale. 3 years ago, Margaret continued, Whitmore Estate was scheduled for demolition. Developers had won. The Historical Society had given up. I attended the final board meeting expecting to vote for closure. She paused, letting the weight of that moment settle. Then a young architect walked in with a proposal. Not just a plan, a vision. She had researched every original blueprint, traced every piece of hardware to its source, and created a restoration strategy so meticulous that our board had no choice but to fund it. That architect was Colette Owens. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My parents stood frozen. For 18 months Colette worked on this building like it was her own. Every door you walked through tonight, she restored them by hand. The chandeliers, the molding, the windows, all of it brought back from ruin because one woman refused to let history disappear. Margaret reached into her clutch and withdrew an envelope. Cream stock, the AIA seal visible through the paper. Tonight she was nominated for our profession's highest honor. And I had hoped to present this letter to her in person, but I've been told she's not well. Margaret looked directly at my mother. Which is strange, because I spoke with her yesterday, and she sounded perfectly fine. The silence that followed was absolute. 150 people, judges, executives, socialites, old money and new, stood in a room full of my work, staring at my parents, waiting for an explanation that couldn't possibly come. The first question came from a woman in a black Chanel dress. Diane, is your daughter unwell, or did you just not invite her? My mother opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands, perfectly manicured, twisted around the stem of her champagne flute. It's complicated, she finally managed. There are family dynamics. The woman's tone was flat. You told Patricia that Colette has mental health problems. You told your book club she couldn't function, but she just got nominated for the highest award in architecture. More voices joined in, not shouting, this crowd was too well bred for that, but pointed, precise. Diane mentioned her daughter works in construction. Is that what we're calling restoration architecture now? I saw the interview quote. My voice was never heard in my family. That's quite something. And then Aunt Patricia, standing near the back, spoke up. Diane, you specifically told me Colette had a breakdown. You said that was why she couldn't come tonight. I believed you. I sent her a sympathy message. My mother's mask finally cracked. I didn't say, I never meant. She never tells us anything. How were we supposed to know? Know what? Judge Harrison stepped forward, his voice cool. That your daughter is apparently one of the most talented architects in the country? That she restored the very building you chose to host this party in? He shook his head slowly. Richard, you told me you were proud of your family. It seems what you meant was, you're proud of some of your family. My father had no response. The mythology my mother had built for a decade collapsed in 90 seconds. And then someone turned to Vivian. It was a young woman about her age, someone from the country club I would later learn, part of her social circle. The kind of friend who knows all your secrets because you told her yourself. Wait, the woman said slowly, realization dawning. Vivian, you told me your sister was finding herself. You said she never really launched, that she was basically, how did you put it? The family embarrassment. Vivian's perfectly composed face went rigid. That's not, I didn't mean it like, you said she had mental problems, that your parents didn't talk about her because it was too painful. Another voice joined in. You told me she works at some handyman company, that she dropped out of college. I said she left her graduate program early, Vivian's voice rose defensively. That's technically true, she finished ahead of schedule but... So she finished early, and then restored a $12 million landmark, and got nominated for the highest honor in architecture. The first woman crossed her arms. That's what you call not launching? I could imagine Vivian standing there, her Oscar de la Renta gown, her perfect hair, her entire identity built on being the successful daughter, watching it all crumble. And then Bradley spoke. Her husband, the Goldman Sachs banker, the one she'd married to complete the picture of success. Vivian. His voice was quiet, but in the sudden hush everyone heard. He told me your sister was troubled, that she was the family shame, that's why we never see her at holidays. He looked at his wife with something I recognized, the expression of a man realizing he'd been given a carefully edited version of his own family. What else have you not been telling me? Vivian's excuses died on her lips. Some lies can survive anything except the light. If you're thinking, how could things change this fast? I want to tell you something. They didn't. This moment was 10 years in the making. 10 years of silence, 10 years of letting my work pile up in the corner while everyone looked the other way. The truth doesn't need drama to come out, it just needs time. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment when everyone finally saw what you'd been building all along? Let's continue. After Vivian hung up on me, I sat in my apartment for a long time. The evening light had shifted to that blue-gray that comes before full dark. My phone had buzzed several more times, texts from colleagues who'd seen the announcement, a voicemail from a reporter at the Globe, but I'd ignored them all. I wasn't ready to celebrate, not yet. I walked to the window. From my apartment, I couldn't see much, just the back of another building, a slice of street, the ordinary life of Cambridge going about its evening. But somewhere 45 minutes away, a party was falling apart. I thought about what Margaret had said on the phone the night before. If you find yourself free tomorrow evening, you know where to find me. I thought about the oak doors I'd spent 3 months restoring, the chandeliers, the hand-painted wallpaper. Every corner of that building held a piece of my attention, my care, my love. My parents had told me I wasn't welcome there. But that building was mine in every way that mattered. I stood up, walked to my closet, found the dress I'd been saving for some future occasion I could never quite name, a midnight blue rat dress, simple but elegant. The kind of thing you wear when you want to feel like yourself, only more so. I put on the Cartier tank watch I'd bought myself after my first major project. It had cost more than I could afford at the time. But I'd wanted something to mark the moment when I'd proven, to myself at least, that I was good at what I did. No one in my family had ever seen it. I picked up my keys. I wasn't going there to make a scene. I wasn't going there for revenge. I was going because that building was mine. And I deserved to stand in it. The drive took 45 minutes. I took the back roads, the ones that wind through old Massachusetts towns where the trees arch over the pavement like cathedral ceilings. I wasn't in a hurry. I'd spent 10 years being patient. Another hour wouldn't change anything. When I turned onto the estate's drive, my breath caught. Whitmore Estate was lit up like a memory come to life. Every window glowed. White lights wrapped the entrance columns. The gardens I'd helped preserve were filled with guests in evening wear, their silhouettes moving against the golden light spilling from inside. I parked at the far end of the lot and walked toward the entrance. The oak doors, my doors, were propped open, welcoming guests into the restored grand foyer. I paused for a moment at the threshold, running my fingers along the wood grain I knew by heart. 3 months of work, 2 coats of hand-rubbed oil finish, hardware sourced from a specialty shop in Vermont that had to special order the hinges from Germany. I'd stood in this doorway 100 times during the restoration, but never like this, never in a dress, never with my heart pounding, never walking toward the family that had told me to stay away. I stepped inside. The foyer opened up around me, the marble floor, the restored chandelier throwing prismatic light across the ceiling, the sweeping staircase I'd fought to save when everyone else wanted to modernize. Every surface held my fingerprints, my decisions, my vision. And then someone turned. A woman near the bar. Then a man by the fireplace. Then another. And another. That's her. A whisper carried across the room. That's Colette Owens. 150 people fell silent. And I stood in the doorway of the building I'd saved, finally ready to be seen. My mother was standing near the center of the room when she saw me. I watched her face cycle through every emotion she'd spent decades suppressing in public. Shock, then recognition, then fear, then, briefly, something that might have been shame. The champagne glass in her hand tilted at a dangerous angle. Her Valentino gown suddenly looked less like armor and more like a costume. My father stood beside her, his face carefully blank. The boardroom expression. I walked toward them, not rushing, not hesitating, just walking, the way you walk when you're going home. Margaret caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod. Permission, encouragement, support. I stalked a few feet from my parents, close enough to be heard, close enough for the guests nearby to hear too. Mom, Dad? My voice was steady, quieter than I expected. I got your message. I know I wasn't invited. My mother opened her mouth but nothing came out. But this building was my project, I continued. 18 months of my life. Every door, every window, every piece of molding you've been showing off tonight. I designed the restoration. I supervised every contractor. I was here before sunrise and after sunset, for a year and a half, making sure this place would stand for another century. My father finally spoke. Colette, this isn't the time or place for what, Dad? For existing? For being good at something? I wasn't angry. That's the strange part. I'd expected to feel angry. I'd earned the right to it. But standing there, in that room, I just felt clear. I'm not here to ruin your party, I said. I'm here because this place matters to me. Even if I don't seem to matter to you. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. My mother recovered first. She always does. Colette, sweetie. The endearment sounded foreign in her mouth, sticky, unpracticed. Of course we wanted you here. We just thought you'd be more comfortable at home. You know how overwhelming these events can be. Overwhelming. I repeated the word slowly, letting its hollowness echo. You told Aunt Patricia I had mental health issues. You told your book club I couldn't function. You told people I work in construction. A few gasps from the surrounding guests. Someone's phone was definitely recording. I could see the subtle angle of a screen, but I didn't care. My father stepped forward, his voice dropping to that low register he uses when he's trying to establish control. This isn't the time or place for family drama, Colette. You're embarrassing yourself. No, Dad. I held his gaze. I'm embarrassing you. There's a difference. Vivian appeared at my mother's side, her face flushed with anger and champagne. You always have to make everything about yourself, don't you? This is Mom and Dad's anniversary, their night, and you just had to show up then. I didn't make the AIA announce tonight, I said calmly. I didn't make Architectural Digest publish tonight. I didn't even know about this party until 3 weeks ago, when you all told me not to come. Judge Harrison's voice cut through from somewhere to my left. Actually, I think the drama started when you invited guests to a building your own daughter restored. And then told everyone she was too mentally unwell to attend. My mother's face crumpled for just a second, just long enough for everyone to see. We didn't, I never said, she was stammering now, the polished socialite gone, replaced by someone who had finally run out of narratives. But I was done listening to her explanations. Margaret Caldwell stepped forward. She moved through the crowd with the quiet authority of someone who has spent her entire career protecting things that matter. When she reached my side, she placed a hand briefly on my shoulder, a gesture so simple it almost broke me. Since Colette is here, Margaret announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, I'd like to share something I had planned to announce regardless of tonight's developments. The room went still. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has approved a new grant in the amount of $500,000 for the restoration of the governor's mansion in Boston. It's one of the most significant preservation projects we've undertaken in a decade. She paused, letting the number sink in. And we have selected Colette Owens to lead the project. For a moment, no one moved. Then applause began, scattered at first, then building, rolling through the room like a wave. Real applause. From people who had no stake in my family's dysfunction, who simply recognized excellence when they heard about it. Margaret reached into her clutch and withdrew the envelope. The official grant letter, the National Trust seal embossed in gold. "This is yours," she said, pressing it into my hands. "You've earned this, not because of who your family is, but in spite of how they've treated you." I looked down at the envelope, felt its weight, understood what it meant. Not just the money, not just the project, but the validation. The proof, documented and official, that I was who I'd always believed myself to be. Behind me, I could feel my parents' eyes, my mother's silence, my father's rigid posture, Vivian's barely contained fury. But for the first time in my life, their opinions didn't matter. The room was applauding, and they were applauding for me. What happened next was almost too perfect. While I stood holding the grant letter, still processing what had just occurred, the guests began to approach. Not my parents, not Vivian, but me. Business cards appeared, congratulations were offered. Real, genuine interest from people who had spent the evening thinking they were at a simple anniversary party, and now found themselves witnessing something far more interesting. My mother stood alone by the fireplace. The women from her book club, the same ones who had sent her sympathy messages about her troubled daughter, were now carefully avoiding eye contact. I watched one of them whisper to another, both glancing at my mother with expressions that had shifted from deference to something closer to pity. Or maybe judgment. My father attempted to salvage what he could. I saw him approach Judge Harrison, hand extended for a shake that didn't come. "Richard," the judge said coolly, "I think you and I need to reconsider that golf invitation we discussed. I prefer to spend my leisure time with people who have their priorities in order." He walked away without waiting for a response. Vivian was standing near the bar, phone in hand, probably composing damage control Instagram stories that would never quite repair her reputation. But it was Bradley's face that caught my attention. Her husband, watching her with the expression of someone rearranging everything he thought he knew. Later, I would learn that Bradley had started asking questions. About what else Vivian had told him, about what other stories she'd constructed. Their foundation, so carefully built on image and assumption, had developed a crack that couldn't be plastered over. And Aunt Patricia found me in the crowd. "Colette." Her voice was small. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Your mother told me things that weren't true. I should have asked you directly." I nodded. What else was there to say? Before I left, I asked my parents for a moment. Not privately, there was no point in privacy anymore. But off to the side of the foyer, near the restored bay window that I'd spent 2 weeks repairing. A few guests lingered within earshot. I didn't care. My mother's face was blotchy beneath her makeup. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Vivian had drifted away, whether from shame or self-preservation I couldn't tell. "I'm not asking you to apologize tonight," I said. My voice was calm, calmer than I felt. "I'm not even asking you to understand what you did wrong." My mother started to speak, but I held up a hand. "I spent 10 years trying to explain myself to you. 10 years hoping that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, you would finally see me. But you never did. You never wanted to." My father exhaled sharply. "Colette, this is hardly the time." "You're right," I said. "It's not. The time was 10 years ago, when you cropped me out of the family photos. The time was every Christmas I wasn't invited to. The time was 3 weeks ago when you texted me that I'd embarrass you in front of your important guests." I looked at them both, really looked, the way you look at something you're ready to release. "I'm done explaining myself. From now on, you can reach out when you're ready to see me for who I actually am, not before." My mother's eyes were wet. "Colette." "Not tonight, Mom." I stepped back. I've said what I needed to say. I turned and walked through the oak doors I'd restored. And for the first time in my life, leaving my family didn't feel like running away. It felt like walking towards something. I learned about Vivian's situation in pieces, over the weeks that followed. Aunt Patricia became my unexpected source of information. Apparently being lied to about your niece's mental stability creates a certain solidarity. She called me a week after the party, her voice careful. "I thought you should know," she said. Vivian and Bradley. They're doing a trial separation. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee growing cold in my hands. Because of what happened at the party? That was the catalyst, but apparently Bradley started asking questions afterward. About other things Vivian had told him, about her charity work, about her finances, about, well, a lot. I thought about my sister's Instagram, the carefully curated photos, the filtered life, the image she'd constructed so meticulously, a house of cards. He realized she'd been editing the truth for years, Aunt Patricia continued. Not just about you, about everything. I didn't feel satisfied hearing this. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. Sad maybe, for the sister I might have had if she hadn't spent so long trying to be the only one worth seeing. A few days later, Vivian sent me a text message. 4 words. You ruined my life. I looked at it for a long time, then I deleted it without responding. I didn't ruin her life. I just stopped being the convenient explanation for her own unhappiness. Without a scapegoat, without a troubled sister to point to, all her carefully constructed stories had nothing to hide behind. The truth doesn't ruin anyone, it just reveals what was already there, and sometimes, what's there isn't pretty. 3 months after the party, I received a text message from my father. I almost deleted it unread. We hadn't spoken since that night, not a word, not an email, nothing. I'd been at peace with that silence. I'd learned that some relationships aren't meant to be repaired, they're meant to be released. But something made me open it. Colette. I'd been thinking, I'd like to see the governor's mansion project when it's done, if you're okay with that. Dad. I read it 3 times. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an acknowledgement of everything that had happened. The years of dismissal, the lies, the text message telling me I'd embarrass them. It was just an ask. A small door cracked open. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit for a week, turning it over in my mind like a stone I'd found on a beach. Then I wrote back. Okay. When it's done, I'll let you know. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, I haven't decided, but it was a possibility, a chance for something different if he was willing to do the work. My mother hasn't contacted me at all. According to Aunt Patricia, she's still in denial, still telling people that the party incident was a misunderstanding, still insisting she's done nothing wrong. Some people can't admit their mistakes without their entire identity collapsing. I don't know if she'll ever be ready, I'm not waiting to find out. What I've learned is this. Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it. It's about me not carrying the weight anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it definitely doesn't mean going back to the way things were. Some doors can be opened again. Others stay closed for a reason. I'm standing outside the governor's mansion now. It's a gray morning, late winter, the kind of cold that makes your breath visible and your fingers stiff. The building rises in front of me. 3 stories of federal architecture, brick and limestone, windows that have watched over Boston for 200 years. It needs work. A lot of work. The foundation has cracks, the roof needs replacing, there's water damage in the east wing that will take months to address. I can't wait to get started. I think about the girl I was 10 years ago, the one standing at the edge of her sister's wedding photo, wearing a second-hand dress, wondering why she never quite fit. That girl spent so long waiting for permission, waiting for her family to see her, waiting for someone to confirm that she was worth something. I don't wait anymore. The Cartier tank watch on my wrist catches the morning light. I bought it myself, with money I earned, for work I did well. No one in my family gave it to me. No one in my family even knows its value. But I do. A reporter from the Globe called yesterday, wanting to do a follow-up interview. Ms. Owens, she asked, what advice would you give to young architects just starting out? I thought about it for a long time. Build something that lasts, I finally said. And don't wait for permission from people who never plan to give it. She wrote it down. I wonder if she understood what I really meant. I spent 10 years proving myself to people who didn't want proof. They wanted me to stay small, stay invisible, stay in the box they'd built for me. But buildings aren't the only things that can be restored. Sometimes, the most important renovation is the one you do on yourself. So that's my story. No magic wills, no secret inheritances, No dramatic courtroom reviews, just 10 years of work, a few official documents, and the slow, patient accumulation of truth. My parents texted me 3 weeks before their party and told me not to come. They said only high society guests were invited. They said I'd embarrass them. And then the news anchor said my name on the same night they were trying to erase it. I don't know if that's karma or coincidence. I don't know if the universe arranges these things, or if we just notice the patterns that fit the stories we need to tell. What I do know is this. I stopped waiting for my family to see me. And somehow, that's when everyone else did. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own 10 years, if you're working in silence, building in the dark, waiting for someone to notice what you've done, I want you to hear this. Keep going. The people who dismiss you might never change. Your family might never understand. The recognition you deserve might come late or not at all, or in ways you never expected. But your worth isn't determined by whether they see it. Your worth is determined by you. Build something that matters. Let your work speak. And when the time comes, when the doors finally open, walk through them with your head held high. You don't need anyone's invitation to stand in the rooms you've built. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it resonated with you, drop a comment. I read every one. And if you want to hear more stories like this, there's another one waiting for you in the description. Until next time. Colette. Thank you for being here with me until the very end. If this story touched something in you, let me know in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell if you want more stories like this. There's another story waiting for you right now. Check the description for the link. I'll see you in the next one.